So tonight we are live here with Mike Zatek of Sunnyside Apiary. We've known each other, I think, for a few years, talked through Instagram, and we met at Hive Life. So can you introduce yourself? Tell us about your beekeeping and how you got here.
How you doing? My name's Mike. I'm a beekeeper in West Wareham, Massachusetts, which is over by the Cape Cod area. In our part of the state, people use the we're the armpit. People use their arm. My town's the armpit, and so I was up to 70 hives last year and culled down to 59 before winter and lost 3 over winter. So it was my best winter survival wise. That was my 5th year. We're entering my 6th season, and that was my best year so far survival wise.
Yeah.
That's pretty much I have apiaries in the area.
So you primarily sell honey, right?
So far, I'm kind of in the stage where I'm building my numbers up and selling the honey the bees make, and just really focused on the numbers. So I don't sell bees just yet. I don't sell any other product, just that. And so far, I'm a beekeeper. I sell the honey the bees make, and just seeing where it takes me, because you really need numbers. My goal is definitely to be full-time at it as soon as I can. And in Massachusetts, you need like 400 or 500 hives to expect bees to pay all your bills and not struggle.
Yeah.
So I got some. My full-time job is marine construction down Cape Cod, and So I got a long road ahead of me before I could quit my job, considering the amount of hives I need.
Yeah. So you said you started in 2017, I want to say, right?
I'm pretty sure that was the first season.
Yeah, I think it says in your Instagram bio. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how did you even get interested or get started with bees?
So I'm from a part of Massachusetts that I like to call cranberry country. It's it's a bi-county region. It's pretty much all of southeastern Massachusetts, a little bit of Cape Cod too, and that's where cranberries come from. I got a job years ago now, working for a friend's family's cranberry farm, and just fell in love with the agricultural lifestyle. And a few years after that, I got into beekeeping just as exploring its a type of agriculture.
Yeah.
So that's how I got into bees and just fell in love with doing it. And here we are now, from 1 to 70 to 56.
Yeah. A story like yours isn't uncommon. I mean, bees they're very addictive, quite addictive.
For sure.
So you started with an Italian hive, if I remember correctly, right?
Yeah, I kept Italian bees just that first season. I got them just what the local bee club provided, and they did great. They, with minimal feeding, that package made 20 deep frames of wax and filled them up mostly on their own. And I even made a shallow of honey, about 30 pounds that first year. When they tell you, don't expect that. And so I'm almost like chasing the dragon. Just that it was so satisfying getting that honey that first year and watching that super for weeks on top, because I put it on during our 3-week dirt.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, when we have a plant called plethora, and that flow hit, and within a week, it was just done, in 2-3 weeks, and it was done, capped over everything. I was like, wow, that's phenomenal. And so I really just loved that. And those bees unfortunately didn't survive that first winter.
Yeah.
So I made a change and got Russian bees, and those have worked real well for me in my area, for sure.
How did you find the Russian bees?
I actually moved to the western part of the state. I'm 33 years old, and around age 25, 26, I started going back to school at the local community college, and studying agricultural stuff, and I got myself into UMass Amherst eventually, and graduated at age 30. But yeah, I got the full Bachelor of Science, Sustainable Food and Farming degree. And while I was over there, I got in touch with Dan Conlon. His farm's over there. It's like 20, 25 minutes north of UMass. And I got in touch with him. And at the time, he was the president of the Russian Breeders, Honeybee Breeders Association. And I got in touch with him and worked for him as an intern for a year, and learned a lot about bees. And he hooked me up with my Russian bees, and I never really looked back. Like they take care of themselves a lot better than the Italian bees I had experience with,
Yeah. It's the commercial stock. They work well for commercial beekeepers. They may eat you out house and home, but they're producing brood so much of the year that it makes sense for them to have them. So of course that might be the case. It's interesting with Russians. So like I started with your average Italian package my first year, and I would say I had to do more work than you, but I think I might have better honey location in general. But we fed a good amount that first year, and they made it through the winter. But they died in the early spring, not really due to their breed, but they had their queen just failed on them. And by the time that I requeened, it's so funny now looking back on it, because if I had seen that hive now, I would have known instantly the first inspection that they were screwed. But I'd never seen a hive coming out of winter. And so because of that, I thought, they're just kind of small, but I had no frame of reference at all. And by the time that we added a queen, I think it was like one of the last couple days of May, first days of June, there was probably a couple hundred bees in there. So I don't even there's no reason that I should have wasted $40 on a queen for that hive. Of course, they killed her anyways, but it wouldn't have mattered even if she had survived.
I know the feeling. That was similar situation to my first year. They did actually make it into early spring, but I don't know. Just the queen just didn't lay brood. I don't know. I can't. I was not experienced enough to explain.
You just don't know. Like you don't know how much you don't know. I didn't treat
for mites. It's like anything could have happened. I don't know. I had no idea what I was doing that first year. That's everyone's story. It seems like first year.
I got really lucky. So I think I've told this story before on the live chat with Natalie. When I started, our queen died. Well, that isn't lucky, but when we were installing our first package, it didn't go all that well, I would say, because when we put in our queen, we came back 3 days later to check her, and we wedged her in between the frames. She'd fallen down onto the bottom of the hive, and the bees didn't cluster around her. And so she was we thought she was dead when we looked in there. And so we brought her inside, and she was just she was pretty much dead. She was just moving a tiny bit. Looking back on it now, maybe they would have been able to revive her. Regardless, we bought a new queen, and the bee supply, our bee supplier happened to be going to a dentist appointment on our road. And so he drove by and dropped the queen in our mailbox.
Nice.
And so he happened to know a beekeeper that lives 2 houses down from us that took bee school and became a beekeeper 5 or 6 years before we did. And so I happened to have a mentor that lived right next to me, and she taught me I would have been so screwed that first year without her. She's taught me so much over the years. Yeah. So that's how I got lucky. So even though I was clueless, I had someone else to be more knowledgeable and less uncertain. So I'm thankful for that much, at least.
Yeah, no, mentors are definitely very helpful, very key, for sure.
Absolutely. So you mentioned the plethora earlier.
Yep.
You talk about it all the time on Instagram. I mean, you're obsessed with it. So can you explain the obsession, Mike?
Well, I call plethora kind of like my secret weapon. It blooms in August, and my birthday is also August 11th, and that's kind of like the peak of the flow most years. And it's this phenomenal flow that occurs in the wetlands of cranberry country. It's a bizarre type of agriculture that exploits the wetlands. They basically build these raised beds in the swamps out of sand and grow the cranberries on them. And anywhere that there's just that, pretty much in my area, anywhere that's not already built up or a cranberry bog is wetland or like moist forest land, and the plethora is just everywhere in this area. And it blooms in August, so last year we had the driest year ever, and it performed enough to at least backfill all the double deep, all my double deeps brood nests. I didn't get a crop last year, but all the brood nests got backfilled on their own, so I didn't have to feed any of my big hives.
Yeah.
The same thing happened in the wettest year of all time. I got one hive to produce about 30, 40 pounds of it, and on undrawn foundation. So they also made the wax. So like, if you have the right population at the right time, this flow is phenomenal. And but it was only one hive that did that year, and that was the wettest year of all time. Like that year, but the 2021. Very wet, very, very wet, extremely wet. And the plethora did better in the wetness. It's a wetland plant. So
that makes sense. Yeah.
It also, in August, we get like 90, 95 degree days, and the plethora still performs. All the wetland plants seem to still perform under those conditions. It's the wetland itself, the bogs, they produce their own heat because it's so much organic matter. If you look at a thermometer, when I used to work on the cranberry bogs, I looked at a thermometer. Every bog has a thermometer on the surface, and there was one day that was 100 degrees out. I checked the bog temperature, 115 bog surface of the cranberry bog. So it's a kind of bog environments are kind of extreme. They're also cold sinks in wintertime. So in wintertime, the area where I have my hives right on the bogs, it's a little rougher on them too. And then it takes longer for springtime to start in the boggy area. But once you get into spring and it flips over, like when it's warm enough, when it's over 40 every night, it flips over, and the bogs are more productive than the upland areas in my area.
That's really interesting. So I figured we talked about this before. So here's what the plethora looks like. Its other name is called sweet pepper bush.
That's the common name. Yep.
Yeah.
Plethora is the scientific.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that. Yeah.
Plethora anifolia, something like that. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing the second part right.
Come on, you went to UMass. What? Mike, what?
I'm not that. I'm not as poindexterous as I look.
Yeah. Well, I remember seeing you taking pictures on Instagram, like of being right on the water. Is that a lake, or can they grow even pretty close to the ocean?
They do grow right up to the ocean too. I see them all the time, right up against the salt marsh, because I work on the ocean doing my marine construction, and I see large swaths of plethora. It's definitely salt tolerant for sure. For sure.
And then there's the rare pink plethora. I think it's more common as like a landscape plant. I've seen my friend who went to the botanical gardens in my area said she saw one of these, and the bees just were going crazy about it because we don't have any nectar that time of year. So I'm sure they really enjoyed it.
Yeah, if anybody, this is a great supplement to anybody's like fall flow. This will thrive anywhere. Put it under your gutters, under anywhere that gets wet, like puddly areas in your yard. Like this plant will thrive. It can have wet feet indefinitely. You could plant it in a puddle.
You think it would do better in a puddle, right?
I can't tell you that much.
For sure.
I haven't run that experiment. I just know that in the wild, it exists in fully wet feed. It exists uplands, lowlands, wetlands. It does well in a lot of conditions, but the wetter, the better, it seems.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense if it evolved there. Lagrange bees, thinking Quebec, my main flow is basswood. It gets insane. Each of my hives drew out and filled just over 2 medium supers. That apiary is a comb making machine.
That basswood can be like that for what I hear. I don't really get basswood in my area. We have a special sandy, acidic soil. So basswood doesn't do as well. It needs limey soil. I actually have a lot of inkberry, like gallberry they call it in the south. We call it inkberry up here. Holly. I believe inkberry and holly are a major part of my spring and summer honey. We're the northernmost range of those two plants, and we actually have a lot of them in the bogland.
How long is your flow? I don't even think I actually know that. How?
Well, I mean, I'm still kind of learning my flow, but it pretty much late April, May, it definitely kicks off where I'm like really the bees, the strongest hives are definitely putting you can expect it by late April. May, it's definitely kicking off. June, they put it away. That's the main flow is June. And then that for most of June, and then into July a little bit, depending on how much rain we get. And then we have like I usually pull honey like the week after, like pretty much 4th of July. I try to pull honey that week. And then start getting them ready for plethora. I always try to get them ready for plethora and get all the spring honey off. And so then I always, it's a lot of extra work, but I always go for it. So it's like 3 weeks, and then plethora starts, and usually I always get a trickle in like September, October. There's definitely enough to stimulate the bees, maintain the weight they gained on the plethora flow. There's always enough during September, October so far. And last year they even put away extra honey in the supers. It was the best September flow I ever had. It was phenomenal last year. We get a lot of smartweed, and there's some type of, I never identified it, there's some type of wetland goldenrod that was just all over the bogs. Even the production bogs were just tinted kind of yellow at one point in the season, and the bees were all over it. So you mean the water, or just like there's just so many of it? It's just everywhere. No, on the bogs themselves, not before they flooded them, because they're like raised beds. Just as a weed in the cranberry bog.
Gotcha. I get it. You're speaking metaphorically. Lagrange Bee says acidic soil is great for blueberries. You don't have any blueberries. You're in cranberry country,
No, we do have blueberries.
You do?
There's not much production farms, maybe here and there, but a few. But no, there's a lot of because we have the forest. Anywhere that's not wetland is what do they call it? A coastal pine barren. And though there's a lot of both low and high bush wild blueberries in my area. And that's probably supplements my early spring flow, I'm sure.
Yeah, I don't know what time of year those bloom exactly. It's interesting with your flow, early. Like early. Okay.
I think they'll be one of the first things. They haven't bloomed yet, so they're after, because my maples are currently like kind of peaking right now. Did your maples pop yet?
Definitely not.
No.
It's gonna be 20.
They didn't even start yet.
So it's hard for me to judge with maples, really, because I don't have any maples like directly on my property to go like look up the tree and look at. But as far as pollen goes for us, I saw some pollen put in that video from a couple days ago. That was Monday, I think. Yeah, Monday. And I would guess that was from like crocuses and some other maybe skunk cabbage if we had it. Something like that.
Well, I get skunk cabbage. I probably get a whole flow of it. It's abundant for sure.
Yeah, so I would guess our maples will start blooming probably like a week or 2 weeks till they start. We typically get it like mid to late May. Last year I put it in an Instagram post because I had Gus Mitchell was talking about it. I think it's the Norwood or Norway maple, something like that.
Norway maple, yeah, that's a commonly planted maple. It's one of the most common ones you see in developed areas that are planted.
Yeah, its native range isn't up here, but it is somewhat planted and can spread because it's not like an invasive, but it can spread some. And so last year when I cracked into my colonies for the first time on April 12th, I saw like a half frame just full of green Norway maple pollen. So it was pretty cool to see.
In my area, the Norway maples bloom after the native maples.
Yeah, I don't.
Well, after like when the weather's a lot warmer, they bloom. In my
I don't know,
area.
maybe they bloom earlier than I think, but generally I don't see much pollen until mid-April ish that time. But we'll see. It depends on the year. Some years are earlier than others. Yeah, you got an admirer here.
It's my buddy T Burr. What up?
I figured. The Grange Beast here. Quebec is still covered in snow. It's melting fast though. There's a few silver maples on the way to the grocery store, but it's covered in buds, but not blooming yet. Yeah. I don't think we've had any, well, I think bees can technically forage for pollen when it's like 42 degrees or something. Like plants will be able to produce pollen at like 42 degrees, I think is what Bob said. Yeah, Bob Binney said. But most of our days have been, I guess, around that temperature, but it's windy enough for the bees just aren't really flying. Like it just takes up the temperature a couple degrees lower.
Over 50, the bees and the plants are like on the same page, I think.
Yeah, for sure. So you've been a beekeeper for what, 6 years now? What is your favorite part of beekeeping? We're all dying to know.
I don't know, all of it, I guess. I really like the process of making the honey and manipulating the hives so they're really big and strong and just stack them up it's tall, like make them taller than me, just full of honey. I like doing that. It's also kind of satisfying too, because you're creating a beast that could swarm at any time, and you're almost like you get to tame it, and keep it from swarming and doing what you want it to do. But honestly, I mean, I like doing queens. I like doing splits. It's like, and I feel like every little thing, including doing queens and splits, it's all part of the process of the end goal of making the honey. You got to do splits to keep them from swarming, and doing splits is like planting next year's crop too. Like you need to be sustainable. You got to make splits. You got to have fresh queens. So I enjoy doing pretty much all of it.
I never thought of it that way, but you are really planting next year's crops and replacing any losses that you do have. It's interesting with splitting. Like, I don't think there's a single beekeeper I can think of who produces honey but doesn't split their bees at some point in the year. Like, people don't talk about that. They don't tell you that when you're a beginner beekeeper, but pretty much nobody just lets their colony, doesn't pull anything out of their colony before the honey season, because if you're doing anything right, that hive's going to be strong enough to swarm before the season even starts. Yeah.
Right. But I mean, it all depends. It's all about your management too. If you know what you're doing in your area, you can kind of manage them the year before. So, and it's like whatever the population is when the flow hits. So it's all about how you manage it, and you got to know your bees, know your area, know your genetics, and how they behave.
For sure. So
it's all an experience thing, really.
It really is. It's a learning curve. Like when you start, you just have no idea what your flows are, when stuff's going to happen, how your bees are going to react. It's kind of it's just like a shock every time. When last year, never gotten any nectar in early May. Bam. We get a 90-degree day in early May, which in Maine is completely unheard of. I can remember because I was in a greenhouse that day. And so I eventually got into the bees during the afternoon, and I checked my out yard 7 days before, and I was going to leave it alone that weekend because I didn't really check them every week, just because of where they were. And I went to check the bees with my friend who lives a couple minutes down the road, and her colonies were bursting at the seams, going absolutely gangbusters, full of nectar, full of pollen. And I said, you know what? I think I'm going to have to go to that out yard. And 2 out of the 3 colonies in the yard had swarm cells in them, like eggs with cups. I guess it'd be cups because they had eggs in them that were about to hatch into larvae. And maybe I would have caught them, but they would have been capped, and I probably would have had to split them at that point. So it's you just don't know. You don't know until you know.
Yeah, and every year I get more confident in the early season checking hives in lower temps and stuff. Like where my first year, it's like I didn't want to check till it was 60 out. Now I'm over here in the 40s, like, and the bees are fine; they can handle it.
Yeah, Caitlin's like, I've inspected bees at the 40s, and as long as you're intentional, and especially if they're a strong colony, it's not a big deal. If you're
Right.
opening up a hive that's a baseball-sized cluster and you're looking into them, that may be a different story. But
Yeah,
if it's a strong hive, you just go quick and you'll be fine.
yeah, you have to
They're not
definitely have to
particularly
have a
happy.
plan. You always need a plan, especially when it's cold out, for sure.
Yeah. So you were talking about you have to know your own bees. So why do you keep Russians?
I just utilized them and just found them to just be better to over in survival in my area, and um, I just like a lot about them. Just the whole Russian Breeders Associate, the program, and everything they do. I just think it's great. Those genetics, they're the newest genetics brought into North America legally, anyway. and and the Russian bees are just awesome. They were the first contact with Varroa over there in far eastern Russia, and that's why they
Yeah.
brought them over. They developed like a natural immunity over 150 years in Russia before even being brought over here. And yeah, I'm really impressed with how they perform, and I'll end up with really high mite counts in my area into like the 40s before fall, and I'll just hit them with a few rounds of oxalic acid, and they come out clean and good and ready to go in the springtime. So even the hybrids that I produce, because I don't have enough purebred Russian bees to say I produce anywhere near purebred, but
Yeah.
I graft from my best purebred Russian queens, and so I produce some decent hybrids, and I'm impressed with how the first Gen 1 hybrids behave. Like a lot. There's some that seem to have the best of both worlds, like low mites like the Russians, productive like Italians. It's definitely predominantly Italian genetics in my area. So I'm impressed with both purebred Russians and first gen hybrids for sure. But third and fourth gen definitely starts waning off on the mite resistance and just the way they behave.
Gen 2, what do you think of Gen 2s? If you really like Gen 1s, but Gen 3s and 4s, is 2's kind of like a midway point?
They just don't survive my management. They don't backfill the brood nest the way Russians do. And I'll take honey off and not feed. They need to be fed like right away. They don't backfill the brood nest. Like the Russians really backfill the brood nest, and you kind of have to pull honey out of the brood nest all the time. And they'll avoid using your supers sometimes. They're a conservative bee. And where like I said, they start to behave more like what I imagine Italian bees are like once you get into second, third, fourth gen. I guess I'm just, for my management, like Russian bee traits is what I need the way I manage my bees. Because Italian bees starve in my hands.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of feeding that goes on with Italians generally. There's some comments about Russians here. I think, this definitely can true. Russians can be nice in the cool, wet weather. DC Spees is from Washington, so I think he's speaking from personal experience there. I know that they do quite well all the way up. I mean, I'm a couple hundred-ish miles north of you, but I've heard that they can do very well, very far north, because it's like with bees, it's just the traits. And what do Russians do well? They heat the cluster with a lot less bees, and they don't eat food quickly. So those are two very nice traits to have in colder places.
For winter time, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely.
And
they didn't lose that ability. They've been breeding them mostly in the deep south for the past 30 years. And then they sell those bees to northern guys, and they did in 30 years of breeding in the south. They never lost that wintering ability. So it just goes to show how strong, how permanent those genetics seem to be, the wintering capability. And another thing about the Russian bees, where they come from in the Primorsky region of like the Pacific coast of Russia, if you look into the geography of it in the ecology, it's very similar to New England. They have the similar wind patterns that bring the continental winds over the area. It's very wet spring times. There's something about it too. It's the only forest in the world that has bears, tigers, and leopards. Maybe it's an amazing ecosystem out there in Russia. I'd love to visit it someday. That'd be cool.
Yeah, here's Lagrange bees here. There's a $24 hole in my wallet because of beekeeping stuff, shopping, lol. But now I have the gear to go to 30 hives. That sounds like a good trade to me. I
Nice.
approve. I approve it.
I just spent $1,000 on frames myself this
Yeah,
past week, and now I'm broke.
I yeah I've bought. I'll probably get close to 1,500 this spring for equipment, but I have like I wanted to buy 100 frames, but I didn't really want to spend the money for it. But so I bought 50 instead, and then I happened to win 20 frames in a raffle, and then another 10
Nice.
frames in another raffle. So now I'm up only 20 under where ideally I wanted to be. I have like 390 deeps or something like that. So yeah, I should have plenty of frames for all my mating nukes because I want to have like 40 mating nukes by the end of July. So
Oh,
hopefully,
damn. Yeah, that's
hopefully that'll go
serious.
well. Yeah,
That's similar to what I got going on between my
yeah,
licensed nukes, and I also use the those
yeah,
easy nukes, the like cardboardy
yeah,
things as mating nukes, and I have about 40, 45 of those.
yeah. I've got 5
Great.
license, 15 kind of like easy nukes, and there's another type that I buy my nukes from a provider from, and they ship them in a different kind of box, but similar idea. And then I also got like seven deep queen castles, 3 frames each, so 21 compartments total, and then I'll have all those full, so 25 or 6 framers, and then 20 or 21 3 framers. That's the goal.
I have a three-way nuke. I might try this year.
Yeah,
It's like a deep with 3 compartments that are
yeah,
like
same thing.
they might be 2 frames. Not sure, but yeah,
Well,
something I'm gonna
yeah,
try this year. Not sure. I have to
yeah.
put it together.
Lagrange bees here. I save money on my migratory covers and bottom boards. 4 sheets cost me $230 Canadian, but I'll get 15 covers and 15 bottom boards. Wow, that's some serious stuff there, Lagrange. What is that? 230 divided by 30. If I could do math quickly here, it'd be what, $8 $8 for covers and bottom boards.
That's
That's pretty
not
good.
bad.
That is pretty good. I would. Yeah, I don't know. I think I'm gonna start building my own covers because like I'm kind of, no one else has a cover like this. I'm revolutionary, so I'm gonna change it up. Um, it's kind of like it's a migratory cover. I don't think I'm gonna put like cleats on it like some other migratory covers have, but I'm gonna put like maybe an inch or an inch and a half of space um, between the frames and the top, or between the top bars and the cover. And then I'm going to stick like a piece of insulation up in there, and then maybe put like a thin piece of wood over it so the bees can't chew on the insulation. They may or may not, but I know it'll be a problem. Eventually some hive's going to mess with it and be annoying. But that way I'll have a hole through the insulation and the wood and an inch and a half so I can feed patties and sugar all using the same outer cover and bucket feed at the same time. So it should have all 3 things that I want to, use it for. And I don't think it'll be that expensive either. So we'll see how it goes. But
Yeah, that Reflectex stuff. A lot of beekeepers use that
yeah,
as the stuff Ian uses. That works
yeah,
real well as an inner cover, like what you're describing.
yeah. I'm gonna also use that. Well, I mean, if you put enough supers on, it's gonna be fine. Like they're not gonna build comb up there, but just in case, I'll probably also have Reflectix as well. Yeah. So you just use typical telescoping covers. Have you figured any cheaper options out?
Um, I just like the way they work
Yeah,
in my area. And so yeah, I pretty much do this regular telescopic. I'm not migratory, so it kind of works for me. And in winter, so yeah, I do that. And in wintertime, I keep the arrangement the same. I just take a piece of 1 inch, the green foam
yeah, yeah,
insulation board, and I put that on top, just to help mitigate a little bit with the condensation. But I leave the
yeah,
arrangement the same, and that works well for me over winter. That's the setup for me.
for sure. Yeah, you haven't had any problems with bees eating the insulation, the foam board?
Some hives chew it.
Yeah,
Some
that's what I
some
thought.
hives
Yeah,
don't. I
yeah,
mean, overall, it's not that big a deal.
yeah. I I realize, like, bees are just crazy. So there's going to be that one hive or those two hives that are going to be really annoying and eat the cover, but all the other ones won't, or maybe more will. But I just know that I'll lose some to that. But I think it's pretty cheap, so it'll be worth it to make those covers. I think I could, like, I mean, I think moisture being an issue over winter is highly overblown, but
I agree.
I do notice a lot of moisture on the top of my frames, and I mean, it's not going to hurt the bees a ton. It might weather the frames to a certain extent more, I would guess, but I don't know. It'd just be interesting to see if I would get the same insulation with the setup I'm actually talking about, where I have the insulation built into the lid with the Reflectix. My guess is it wouldn't get cold enough to condense onto the top of the frames.
And that's my idea with the
foam board
top insulation. But I mean, I still get condensation on the insides if I ever do crack them on a cold day, just for the hell of checking. And it seems like in my experience, if the hive's healthy and has enough honey, you knock the mites down. The bees they blow that moisture away. And if anything, they need that moisture. To eat the honey, they have to mix it to make royal jelly, make brood food. They have to mix the honey with water. So it just makes so much sense to me. They need it. It's an asset, if anything.
Yeah, I haven't really seen much moisture on top of the frames till this year. This is the first year because I didn't want to overwinter with the inner covers again. And because here's my thought process is, when it got to -40 in early February, if there's a ½ hole just letting out heat from the colony, I feel like that would be ideal to not have that. Well, I've had most of my hives survive in prior years. In my head, at least, that would make sense to not have that. Wait for the heat to escape. I'd rather have it sit at the top of the colony, so you have to work less hard to make all the honey and whatnot, or eat all the honey.
Yeah, in my experience, it seems like having that hole and that little vent out the top seems to work, but not overdoing the venting, like just the regular telescopic arrangement with the foam board on top. And that seems to be, I've tried other things in the past. Because they do teach you in the early days, you got to ventilate quilt boards, this, and that. And I found when I used to overventilate and add ventilation, add extra holes, like the comb would get too dry and brittle. And the bees would not want to use it until like your weather really warms up. So, and ever since I just basically the same ventilation as the summertime, I've had a lot less of those, like none of that. I never see like dry, dehydrated combs in the springtime anymore. Yeah. So bees need high humidity. They need
that whole time. Yeah. Yeah. My mom, when we started, my mom was like, I just can't believe they keep the hive that warm and that wet and are able to prevent disease. The propolis helps them with that, but she hit it right on the head. It's extremely wet and very warm in the hive at all times.
The bees like it. Yeah, and it's a largely genetic thing too, like handling the moisture. Like the Russians get significantly less moisture, if any, with the purebreds. So, I mean, they just work really well in my area. I cannot complain.
Yes, LaGrange bees here. If you use 2-inch packing tape, it'll stop the chewing. So I'll definitely look into that because that'd be a lot easier than messing with wood over it. I'll definitely look into that. Thanks, LaGrange. And question about, or have you looked at my winter top insulation right here? It works amazing in singles. I overwintered 14 out of 15. I have not, but I'm a YouTube fiend, so I'll look it up. I'll take a look at it. And going back to the Russians, Mike, I feel like we didn't go into the traits enough, but they're smaller clusters. They are much better about mites. They either, for whatever reason, they seem to deal with higher mite and virus loads, or they also prevent mite reproduction to a certain extent. I think depending on which strains you have, from what you told me.
To my understanding, all of the above. They utilize them all. It's a synergy. It's not necessarily smaller clusters. It's tighter
during the
clusters.
Winter.
No, it's not necessarily smaller. It's tighter clusters. They jam all the bees tighter somehow and are able to be more efficient that way. It's not necessarily smaller. Like you can manipulate them, feed them, and have a bigger cluster if that's something you need. But they will always be tighter. You know what I'm saying? Just be more efficient about how they manage heat and everything. And
Yeah.
that's what I like to see. I was nervous, always nervous, because the cluster really does get small, but then on a warmer day, you open them up. And they're everywhere. It's like boxes full of bees. So somehow they just really tighten up more efficiently.
I guess I equate it. Yeah, I guess I equate it to being smaller, but it's not necessarily being smaller. It's just that they're tighter and they wait longer to get going. They really wait till the nectar and pollen hits. Yeah.
In springtime, they definitely are slower than your Italian bee. And but in my area, and I feel like in a lot of northern regions, that's probably what you want. You want them to wait, because to my understanding, Italian bees kind of go by temperature, go by light, where the Russian bees don't go until the pollen's there. So especially in this day and age of climate change, like the Russian bees wait till it's ready.
Yeah.
And when the pollen's ready, it's time. So they kind of don't brood up too early and get like before a major cold snap. That's where a lot of people lose their hives. When the Italian types brood up on like a random like week of warm weather, then you get a cold snap. Where the Russians, like, you need weeks of warm weather for them to really get going. They don't, they kind of play it safe.
It's interesting with that.
And it works out. It's like, so you have a little more leeway. You don't have to check as early in the season when it's cold.
Yeah.
So it gives you a little cushion in the in this. It works out. It works out in my area. It works out beautifully.
That hive. So you added a super last week, right, on one of your hives?
Yeah, that hive is that's the only hive that got a super. That thing's doing crazy well. I have one more apiary I haven't checked, two more actually, and the last apiary I haven't checked was the one that's like the boggiest one, because like I said, it's such a cold sink. The microclimate's so cold that like the bees are like a week, 2 weeks behind, like even a mile away. It's funny how that works.
Crazy. That's nuts.
It's funny how that, but everything flips. It flips on a certain like day. It seems it just flips once that like the organic matter in the bog activates. Everything just blows up. Like it's pretty, and then it's a heat sink, So
that's really interesting.
Bog environments are really cool. Bog environments are really, and marsh environments are really cool.
Yeah, we got the opposite where I live. We got the ocean, so we have less heat and less cool in the winter. We get the mildest temperature. I mean, I think if you go farther south, you'll get even.
I mean, I'm coastal too. The ocean's a stone throw from one of my apiaries. So like, I have the ocean effect also. For sure.
Yeah. It's interesting. It does affect the bees. Absolutely. It makes me wonder if more central western part of Maine, if they get hotter in the summer, I wonder if that has any effect on the nectar flows. I haven't heard that they do any better, but it does get hotter there for sure.
In the timberland areas of Maine, like I just don't see where the forage would be, like, so it all depends on your forage, really. I know in Western Massachusetts, they have the Pioneer Valley, and I kept bees there when I went to school. And they definitely had like easier springtimes. Like the springtime would just show up and just be there all of a sudden. And, but their fall flows and their spring flows were comparable to mine in cranberry country, but the fall flow was always hit or miss over there. Where the fall flow is a lot more sustainable, and the plethora. I just expect the plethora to work for me. It's been there every year for 5 years in different types of extremes. So even if I don't make a crop from it, it's the bees are able to backfill and be ready for winter on it. So
so in a good plethora year, you would get a deep for winter and then a deep of honey for like sale, or what do you?
There was the best year for plethora I ever had was like 2019, I want to say, and I had one hive. I put a deep box of undrawn foundation, and this hive drew out 8 frames on this flow, and completely capped 6. Like completely capped 6 frames.
Wow.
Completely, and made 8 frames with nectar in it that was not fully capped by the end of the flow. And like I said, that's the type of dragon I keep chasing. Like I'm waiting for like a really good plethora year, and I get 100 hives right, and it also makes some of the whitest wax, like white, like very white wax. It's amazing. So yeah, it's something I'm trying to do, and maybe try to make blocks of just ivory white wax too.
That'd be interesting. It's you said that you're running 10 frame supers right now, but you think in the future when you have more time, you'd want to run 9 framers, right? Or
yeah, and I might experiment with that this year, see how that goes. I did buy a little 9 frame spacer last time I went to Man Lake. I'm going to start experimenting with that. I might have to too, because I'm running low on frames. So it might just make it easier to spread them out. So yeah, I'm definitely going to start experimenting with that. The guys on YouTube who do seem to make more honey doing it, and wax and everything. So it might be a challenge though, because the boxes seem to get like twice as heavy when they do that, and everything's by hand for me. So that could be a challenge too. They could be too heavy.
You haven't upgraded to an easy loader yet? What's going on, Mike?
An easy loader. I wish those things cost more than a Bobcat. Like I'd rather get a Bobcat. You can do so much more work with a Bobcat, but easy loaders are so convenient for beekeeping.
Yeah, for sure. It's
I'd love one.
Yeah. I'm doing in the Gus method this year. I think I saw it was a couple months ago. I was watching his video. He runs 8 frame supers, and what he does is he throws the 2 undrawn in the middle, and then the 8 drawn on the outside. And then once they've got the 2 frames in the top going, he'll pull those out and then space them all out to 8 frames, and then eventually harvest the super. So my plan is I got 8 drawn supers or 7 drawn supers. So I should have, like, I can't remember how many frames I put in, but I should have enough for an extra like 2 supers of partially drawn frames. So I'm just going to toss them all together in a box and add them on since they're already started. And that way I'll get a little more comb drawn. So yeah, it'll make my supers last a little further.
Yeah, if you put an undrawn frame, I definitely do it every year. Like especially into my strongest flow in June. Like I definitely like to start doing that. It's definitely a cool way to boost your draw, get some draw now comb for sure.
Yeah,
it definitely works during your strongest flow. Like definitely.
Absolutely. You said you're chasing the dragon with plethora. I'm chasing the dragon on, well, really both of my flows, but that fall flow, my first year, it was a pretty strong double deep colony, but I did not feed them a drop of syrup. They wouldn't take any. I tried to feed them one time. They filled an entire 2 deeps full of goldenrod honey.
Oh, nice.
And I still haven't. I mean, 2020 was pretty good, but I don't think it was as good as 2018. And then 2019 apparently was a historical nectar flow all throughout the Northeast, including I think where I live. But at that time, I had my first colony overwinter and die, and then I bought 2 nukes, so I did not get to experience the glory that everybody else did.
Yeah, 2019 was the year that was the most plethora I made. Yeah, it was phenomenal. Phenomenal how well that flow will do in the right conditions.
Absolutely, I bet.
It's all you got to have very highly populated hives too. Like
I mean,
that's the key.
Of course. So how do you? So I posted a video a few days ago about the Lyson 6 frame nukes. And you've used them in the past, and you're the one who encouraged me to get them. How do you use them, and what's your favorite part about it?
I kind of use them for a little bit of everything. I use them for my splits. I use them to mate cells, to mate my queens. I use them. I think they make a great medium for a cell builder, especially at my scale. Small cell builders, just to make 10 to 20 queens at a time. I think they're a great size for that, and the insulation works well. Like for that type of situation, and the main thing that makes them better than like other material for it's a great way to bank queens you make or get in the late season. And you get a good mated queen in one of those and get it filled with get that queen to lay 3 or 4 frames of brood in there, and then backfill that, get it chock full of bees. they do really well in my area overwintering. And I'm still tweaking the system. I'm still learning. I'm no expert at it, but
yeah,
it's pretty good. You get that thing chock full of bees and then backfill with feed, and it's a great way to bank queens, I think.
Do you ever plan to use them in a similar way to your Stepler, where you'll kind of any culls in the spring that you'll just drop them in as slots? Do you think?
That's more or less what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm kind of I'm still expanding. Like I'm about to put bees in a new bee yard within the next month. Try to get them there before the main flow starts. So I already have some of my strongest ones in mind for that. So they're going to set up new slots. But, 100%. It's the nuke battery that Ian does is very similar. I use the licensed 6 framers pretty much in a very similar fashion that he uses his nuke system.
How many coats of paint did you use on those? Did you just spray them once and that was all you did?
The license boxes. I gave him 2 coats. 2 coats. Okay. Same way that I would do that. I paint my wooden ware the same way. With two coats of latex paint. Call it a
day. My plan, I think I want to get them done pretty soon. Like maybe as soon as I get back from my trip in a few weeks, and then all my little small colonies, I'm just going to do an experiment. If I put them in a nuke and boost them up, I want to see how fast they'll grow. I don't know. I'm just curious to see how. Obviously, it's not a long-term solution because it's too much labor, but I'm just curious in the short term what a difference that will make or not.
I do 1 and 2 frame splits in the license all the time, and I think they do great in it. So,
yeah, for sure.
It'll work.
Here, we'll just quickly indulge this. We actually met for the first time in person at High Life. What did you think? What was the best part of the conference?
For me, everything was great, but the networking, talking to people, the trade show was great. I got hands-on with a lot of equipment and stuff because all that stuff costs so much money, and
you want to know what you're getting.
Yeah, it's nice to try the shoes on before you buy them. And I got a lot of ideas, just the ideas, and we met in person out there after chit-chatting on Instagram for years. Hey, how's your season going? So no, it's great. It's a great community. It's a great community for sure.
Yep. Here's LaGrange bees again. I use a small cart to carry the hives. I can fit 4 at a time with straps or with 2 without. I can definitely need to get a pickup and an easy loader eventually. That tiny Malibu is not a good beekeeping vehicle.
I'm beekeeping out of a Subaru Outback 2013. Doing my best. 200,000 miles on it, hoping it doesn't explode. Oh, man.
Yes, Mike, where you need to find some more stores to sell your honey in so you can buy that beautiful truck.
Yeah.
When is it going to happen, Mike? Come on.
Gotta sell more honey.
That's what I'm saying. Mike, if you get those queens going, you got to buy her right here. I'm going to buy some Russians this year, but we can work out a deal.
You want some cranberry hybrids?
Yes, some cranberry queens.
Yeah, we could work something out for sure. Yeah.
So last spring, you were pretty elated because you were able to cut down on swarming to an amount you'd never had in the past. Can you just talk about what you did and how that worked out for you?
Yeah, that's one challenge with Russian bees that always stresses me out, and I'm still a little nervous, but a little more confident because last year I kind of seemed to have figured it out, cracked the code, but it's all about drawn comb, and a lot of these Russian bees will come out of winter with too much honey, believe it or not. And so one trick was, I pulled honey out. I did put drawn comb into the brood nest, checkerboard. I did a little bit of checkerboarding. I don't think I'm going to checkerboard again because the bees kind of filled. Some hives did this. They filled it with pollen, like the checkered, and then it split the brood nest. And I kind of didn't like it, so I'm only going to put them right next to the outside.
On the outside mix first too.
Then it's just easier. Then the bees get to pick and not get confused. So putting drawn comb on top. The more comb, the better. The more comb I put on the hive, the less swarmy they were. So
Yeah.
That's really the key is, and that's one thing, that's one challenge, like a lot of folks say about Russian bees is the swarminess. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of the only bee I really know, so I'm used to it, but it's definitely stressful because they are just ready to reproduce once it's time.
Yeah. I heard they grow really, really fast. So it's like the issue is you go in an Italian colony, you see that many frames of brood, you say, okay, I'm good for another 2 weeks. You go into the same Russian colony and you're not good for 2 weeks. They're going to swarm. And I think that's the difference is just being able to evaluate how fast they'll
Right,
be able
right,
to
yeah.
grow and be able to
It's
project that in your head.
right. I mean, and they do say that Russian bees aren't for beginners because you kind of
Yeah.
want to understand brood cycles and all that,
Yeah.
and so because they will get ahead of you quick, for sure. But yeah, I feel like last year I kind of figured all those things out. That prior winter,
Yeah.
I studied swarming and what causes it, how to prevent it like crazy, bought books like Swarm Essentials, like you name it.
Yeah.
And it paid off. I figured it out and felt like the man for it because I always struggled to control swarming
Yeah.
every year prior.
For sure.
And it's great. You control that swarm, and now all of a sudden you're putting honey away, and yeah, you can make splits under your own control, and it's great. It's great.
Do you have any idea how many swarms did you catch last year?
I caught two. I
Two?
caught two. I lost a few more than that.
Yeah.
In my backyard, the bees go 100 feet up in the tree. But there's, yeah, I have two different bog locations in like old
Yeah.
bog, and they both I caught a swarm in either of those, and yeah, that's it. Other than that, I prevented most of my hives from swarming.
Yeah.
And it's a good feeling. It's a good feeling. It's like the beast is tamed when you control the swarm. That's how it goes.
Yeah. Mostly, did you pull any colonies back, or were you just adding comb? Were you just
Oh
taking
no,
honey
I
frames out?
definitely there's some frames that I definitely pulled brood from. And that's another thing that I need to get better at is like what date is safe to get
Yeah.
early queens. It's because I still haven't ordered early queens yet because I'm still not sure. Because plus
Yeah.
I got the kind of slow starting Russians, so early splits it can be done. Like you can plan for it. You feed them
Yeah.
in the fall and make them bigger. But then you could have a swarm situation earlier.
Yeah.
So I have pretty good natural pollen for like if I don't feed, I know the bees, you know what I'm saying? Like I kind of know what they're going to do. I know how
Yeah.
things are going to look.
Yeah.
Where I'd still have to learn how to feed and things are going to be different. And,
Yeah.
When I'm full time, I'll definitely figure all that out. But right now I just kind of let the bees be bees and let nature decide what's best.
Yeah.
And that works out for me.
I'm getting really close to I'm able to figure out now. I'm relatively close basing off of last year and the past couple of years. Like how many frames of brood do I want in what week, and how many frames of honey?
Right.
Like I think I've figured. Yeah, I think I'm getting pretty
that's
close.
That's the difference between a commercial professional versus a hobbyist right there. It's like you got to know what it's going to be in 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and that's all experience.
Yeah, for sure.
You got to keep doing it.
So one of my colonies, I accidentally killed the queen in this colony in early May because I left her in a queen clip in the hive overnight. And apparently like the bees in the queen clip somehow overheated. I guess they all bundled up in there. Yeah, it was really weird. She was alive when I put her in there. Because I left her in there overnight because I didn't want to have to find her the next day since I already found her that day. And they had some swarm stuff going.
Mm-hmm.
But regardless, like that hive is kind of my basis for my thinking about how many frames when. Like last April, it was April 12th last year was my first inspection on that hive, and they had 4 frames of brood. And I don't remember how many frames of honey, but I would assume they would need probably 2 to 3 frames of honey that time of year to get into the year. But I pulled 1 frame of honey out. So like that's kind of my new benchmark is mid-April. I want to have ideally everyone at about around 3 frames of brood, maybe 4. But I think that would be roughly right for me to split in mid to late May.
I think there's a quote. I think it's from a Bob Binney video.
Yeah.
That like 5 weeks before the flow, you want 5 frames of brood or
Yeah.
something like that. Like,
I
but
think
that's all. I'm sure that's all region dependent too.
Yeah. Like it's
But you got to
the
figure out
time.
on your own for
Yeah, the
your
time that it
region.
gets like I was talking to someone from Central Texas last week on the live stream, and she was like, "Yeah, we all of our splits that we make that spring, we intend to make honey from that the spring flow," which I thought was nuts. That's crazy. Like she makes all of her, she's able to, her honey flow doesn't start till May around your time, but
Mm-hmm.
their bee season really gets going in like late April or sorry, late February. She's making splits, but their flow doesn't start till
Do
May, which is just crazy.
do they get a light flow in February, or are they
They
feeding to boost them to split?
She said they do get like a trickle. They get a trickle till May when their flow starts,
Mm-hmm.
but it's just like the idea of making honey off of all of your splits is just crazy to me. Like,
Yeah, I mean,
when,
when you have
yeah,
warm weather where you can prepare them for that, then it's definitely easier. Winter's an extra
yeah,
stressor on the bees for sure. You got it easy. They got it easy where there's no real winter for sure.
yeah,
Easier.
but they
It
got the
comes with
long
other
summer.
challenges.
Yeah,
Yeah, long
yeah,
dirts. So they have other challenges for sure. But
for sure.
yeah, no, beekeeping isn't. There's no place perfect for
Yeah,
beekeeping. That's not a thing. There's always a challenge.
there's always a trade-off. Really, it's
Yeah. Yep.
you get one thing, you miss out on something else, and there's just always something.
Yep.
I was talking to a viewer from Minnesota. I think his name's Russell. He was commented on my video about the adding pollen patties. He was like, "Yeah, I'm in Minnesota. We still have 10 inches of snow on the ground and 8 inches coming tomorrow. It's in the teens today. I wish I had your winter." That's what he said to me.
Those guys make a lot of honey out there, though. I
Yeah,
mean, it's one of the top states, if I'm not mistaken.
yeah, and they also get negative 20s, 30s in the winter every
Yeah.
year. It's crazy. The swing
Yeah.
from amazing honey production to insanely long cold winters. Nuts.
It's almost like a winter's good for honey production.
What do you think there's any correlation, or what correlation would you guess?
I don't know. Just the
Yeah,
fact that I feel like wintertime for winter adapted plants, it's a rest period,
yeah,
So that's the only thing I would really could correlate is the deep freeze is like a rest period. I don't know.
yeah.
Um, that's it.
That's it. All right. Well, I'm really glad to have you on tonight, Mike. People can check you out on Instagram and Facebook, right?
Yeah, so the Instagram is Sunnyside one word underscore apiary, and then the Facebook's just Sunnyside apiary. That
Yeah.
should come up, but yeah, yeah, that's where you can find me and follow my beekeeping journey.
If you want to see someone flex, a lot of times,
Yeah,
he's your guy. He
yeah,
likes to flex with the bees.
the Cape Cod flags, the Cape Cod flags.
Yeah. So, well, thanks for coming on. I had a great time, and
Yeah, I enjoyed it. We did it for over an hour. Nice. Nice.
yep, for sure. Well, have a good night, Mike. Yep.
All right,
Bye.
you too. Have a good one, Rainier.
Yep.